Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward. I'm here with my friend and colleague Jim Gurley, and today we're going to use our foundational flywheel as we always do with the five key areas of life. And Jim, if I forget one, you can pipe in, but it's relationships, money, health, worldview, and profession. And in the center of the surrounding in the center of that is the self. And today we're going to lean on our one of our favorites, which is self-awareness. And as a result of a conversation we were having beforehand, we're going to talk about in general how all five areas of our lives are impacted by our self-awareness, and inside of that it how we respond to things being so much more important than what actually happens to us, what happens during those things, those times. And we're all, the difference between how you might have reacted to something in your 20s or 30s versus your 50s or 60s. Are you taking advantage of that life experience? Have you mellowed into self-awareness? And because the stuff keeps coming, right? And Jim, you throw it over to you. You suggested you might have a story for us.
Uh, yeah, I've got a short story, but like you said, Mark, I think what we keep circling back to in those five areas about our self-awareness, but it's not what happens to you; it's how you respond to what happens to you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and when we were talking about this, and I think you framed it well, you respond very differently today. We do, in our 50s, 60s versus our 30 or 40-year-old self or our 20-year-old self, right? And I appreciate you saying that because it is different. Like, and I'll share kind of a funny story. And then the other one, I think we always revert back to, and it works. And you bring it up because I think it applies. We grow bitter or we grow better, but it is a decision,
Yep.
and that's a conscious decision, and it starts with an awful lot of self-awareness and work. And I think we work hard on this show and every episode not to grow bitter and become those angry old guys that talk about the good old days. And that's not easy. It's easy to default into thinking it was better in the past, right? But yeah, I'll kick off. You'll love this story, Mark. It's such a San Francisco story, right? San Francisco Bay Area. So I had an appointment. This is yesterday. At appointment in San Francisco, and like always, you got to get over the bridge. So I'm only like 30 minutes away, but depending on traffic, that could be an hour and 30, no problem, right? So you have to plan ahead, and you're not just planning ahead for the traffic, but you're planning ahead for the parking, because the parking's like any big city is going to be a disaster if you don't allow enough time and figure it out. And even though I've been to this particular building downtown San Francisco on Van Ness before, I also know the complications that you can run into. And I don't like being late. So it's important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was nice, I had a nice drive over, beautiful day, going over the bridge, going, this is a great day. This is wonderful. It's sunny and it's all good. Right. So I couldn't believe it. Find a parking spot directly in front of the building. And I get, I got, this is too good to be true. I can't believe this. I don't have to get a parking garage. So I park. And then, like I believe that parking meters are complete scams. I think there's just it's entrapment, right? There's this trickery to make you fuck up so they can generate revenue. That's full disclosure. I believe they're all that way, but I'm prepared. I carry extra coins just in case the credit card doesn't work. I read the signs 3 times. They're not getting me. They get me all the time. So not this time. No fucking way. I was prepared, right? So sure enough, I can't read the screen because the sun's shining in the screen, so you can't see anything. But I figure out the meter enough to where, okay, fine. I got my coins, walk to the car, get my quarters, put them in there, get the meter out there, hour and a half, put a little extra time in there. I don't want to give them too much money, right? But had some extra time. And then I said, okay, I put in my license plate number. And I go, you know what? I'm going to take a picture of this just in case, because I don't trust these fuckers, right? So, so I take a picture of the parking meter that says, hour and 40 minutes, the time and everything. Then I take a picture of my car
Mhm.
with the license plate just in case.
Mhm.
I'm feeling pretty good about myself, right? Going to the appointment goes well, walk out. Sure as shit, there's a parking ticket right on my car. And I'm going, what? No way. There's no way I can get a parking ticket, right? So I grab the ticket and I look at the ticket and I go, that's it. I'm driving directly to the main San Francisco parking bureau, whatever, right? So so I flipped the car around. Luckily, it was just down the street. I put in the GPS the address. I drive in, I park right in front of the building, right on Van Ness. Should have got a park ticket for that because there it's not no parking there, right? It's like a loading zone. I go into the building and it's like the DMV, so there's a bunch of probably 200 people. You got to get a ticket to get in line. And I get my ticket. There's only two people in front of me. I walk up to the counter and there's this woman there, older, you know, nice lady. She says, "How can I help you?" And I said, "Here's how you can help me. I just got a parking ticket. Here's my ticket." No, I said, here's my phone. I have a picture of the meter that says I paid. And she looks at me and she goes, "Let me see your ticket." She grabs the ticket. She looks at it and she goes, "That's not for expired meter. That's because your tires weren't turned in." I go, "What?" She goes, "You were parked on the hill?" I go, "Yeah." She goes, you have to turn your tires in." I go, "You're telling me I got a parking ticket because they didn't turn my tires in?" She gets this big smile and she says, "Only in San Francisco." And she was cool. She just smiles and says, "Only in San Francisco." Like
That's
only,
funny.
she goes, "Yeah, only in San Francisco. You can get a $63 parking ticket for not turning your tires." So now I'm furious, right? Because on my way to this building, I got to drive through the Tenderloin. There's fucking drug addicts, people pissing right in the middle of the street. Nobody gets a ticket for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just like 5 blocks away. And so anyway, it turns out, yeah, San Francisco, if you're parked on Hillside, you get it. So then I took because I had a picture of my car. Sure enough, I look at the picture and 9 degrees. All I had to do was turn my tires 9 degrees in and I wouldn't have had a parking ticket. So the gist of the story is how I responded to that, right?
Mhm.
At the end of the day, hey, I broke the law. I paid the $63. It's over. It's done. But yeah, how I have it's kind of a reputation of having problem with public agencies and these kind of situations, and they don't always go so well. Like I get over um, say emotional about the situation, and then cause more problems. This one, I just say, hey, life is life. You move on. Luckily, I had the $63. I went on, but
Well,
it.
it's a couple of thoughts there. Trying to stay on topic.
Yeah, talk
Um,
about
but
worldview,
but
right?
but but San Francisco's like bizarro world. It's
Oh,
like you're gonna get a $63 ticket for not turning your tires in, but you can take a dump in the middle of the street.
that's what I was saying. So, you got to laugh about it. But I was looking at the wheel and think how many areas this hit, Mark, right? It
All of
definitely
them.
affected my worldview, right? Of
Yeah.
San Francisco, how kooky this place has become.
Yeah.
But it would have affected my mental health because I was so angry that
Yeah.
this and clearly my profession, everything can affect your profession,
Hmm.
but it also got my money, right?
Yeah.
It's the most sensitive area because it was only $63, but come on,
Yeah.
and then
Oh,
people,
it's not about the $63. It's about the principle.
but it
Yeah.
hit every one of our areas.
Everyone, yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's
yeah.
it's
But
it's funny because, and I appreciate the story. It's a good
yeah,
story, but we were talking before we hit record, and there's so many dots to connect here because there's so many life experiences. But I was thinking, I used to drive a Honda years ago, and I remember I had it for those things run forever, 25 years ago. So I was, in my early 30s. I was still relatively young and foolish. And I remember when I sold that car, the top of the steering wheel was was so frayed, and it was actually, there was an indent in the wheel because of how angry I drove so frequently.
Yeah.
And it was, because I was on the playing field when I was in my car. It was like the only two places I lost my cool were in my car and on the playing field. And usually on the playing field or the court, whatever, I did it within the bounds of the law, the rules. But
Hmm.
you can be aggressive. You can hit guys. You
Yeah.
can, move. You can get your aggression out. And I was very competitive. I'm less so now because
Hmm.
I can't do what I used to be able to do. So what's the point? And
Hmm.
being competitive serves you when you're young, I think, but less so when you're older. And that's probably
Yeah.
a whole
No,
topic unto
interesting
itself.
perspective. I appreciate you saying that was it's like you said, this is what it's about, right? Also, just driving in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm finally at that stage now where it used to be somebody flies by you, you flip them off, or
Yep.
and especially right now, what's going on? It's dangerous. People actually
It
get shot
is.
at,
It
and
is. Yeah.
it's
When
certainly not
we,
worth it. Yeah,
yeah, when we were in our teens and 20s, if you got out of a car to confront somebody, you were going to get into a fist fight more often than not, but
that's
no
right.
one was going to pull a gun or a knife on you.
Hmm.
And you can't count on that anymore. But
Yeah,
I used to lose my shit in the car.
yeah.
And my kids would just, they found it hilarious and disturbing at the same time. But I remember many years ago, I was driving, my son was in the car and the windows were open. And the person that was upset with me, I don't even remember what I did. Maybe I cut her off or something without, by mistake. And she started screaming
Yeah.
like right at me. And in order for me to respond to her, I had to go right where my son's head was because I turned the passenger seat. So I'm saying this right past him. And I beamed with a big smile and I said, "Merry Christmas." And this lady had no idea what to do.
Yeah.
And I think it was since then. I don't remember getting upset in the car anymore. And I think it's part of my self awareness journey, and it's part of my how you respond to things journey. And it's really like, to your story point, it's like, okay, if I give myself the opportunity to pause and
Hmm.
actually objectively assess this, this is a waste of my time.
Hmm.
This doesn't serve me at all. If I scream at this woman, it doesn't serve her at all. I
Yeah.
might ruin her day. I'm
Yeah.
setting a bad example for my son. I'm not accomplishing anything, and
Yeah.
my blood pressure goes up. Like, where's the win there? You
Yeah, no,
know?
it's well said. And again, back to how to respond. I love this woman, right? Again, she's older, heavy set. She was African American, and she just says to me, she goes, "Let me see the ticket." Right? She grabs the ticket. I didn't even read the ticket. Right? I was
Mhm.
so convinced I was right. Right? That I never even read the ticket. All I read was the address on there, and she grabbed it and she looked at it and she goes, "That's not a parking ticket." And then she looked up with a big smile and she says, "Only in San Francisco."
Yeah,
Wink,
yeah,
wink.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Have a
Well,
nice day.
yeah, you know what's it's interesting because what it makes me think of is exactly what we're talking about is like how many times has she had to smile like that at someone who got a $63 ticket for not turning their wheels? Like 1,000. And so most of those people like you are a little bit pissed off and not necessarily going to be friendly right out of the gate. And she's developed her way to respond, which is just a big old smile because it works.
Only in San Francisco. She had to take it back. Like, and you think about the words only, like it only had. She goes, no, like only, like it's the only place anywhere where you get a ticket for not turning your wheels.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's funny. No,
Yeah.
it's like, and to back on topic or inside the topic, it's just like we were talking beforehand about my personal experience with self-awareness. Then you shared some of yours. And, in the context of our kids, in the context of our relationships, in the context of some of our friends and their relationships, you say it all the time, and I'm 100% agree. All this shit's a choice, all
Mhm,
of it, you
mhm,
know? And I think we lose sight of that because of all the victimhood now and all the divisiveness and the groupthink. We lose sight of the fact that you either make your choices or you give your choices away,
mhm,
right? And that's a choice, right?
mhm,
It's ultimately all of it's a choice. And I think that, and maybe this I think to me, I had some good foundational stuff in my upbringing. I had some good faith. I had some good parents. I had some talents and some level of appreciation. I was very fortunate, but it's still all choices, and I made plenty of bad ones,
Hmm.
and plenty of good ones. But I think over time, as I've been much more interested in self awareness, because it makes me happier, it makes me more content, it makes me more helpful, more productive. That if you really ratchet up the self awareness, and you know what the self awareness stuff is, it's meditation, it's
Yeah.
prayer, it's exercise, it's reflection and visualization, and all these things. Reading stuff and talking to smart people and interesting people, all of the above.
Hmm.
You get to a point eventually, if you keep trying, where you're like, "Yeah, I'm at peace with most of this stuff. I recognize that bad things might still happen. I recognize most of this shit I don't have any control over, and that's a helpful one to learn too.
Hmm.
Um, but I have a certain ease about me now that I'm really happy with, and I've
Yeah,
watched
and as a
you.
result, people will you can really calm a situation down, right? Just
Yeah,
because if you're that way, then that other people feed off of that. So
yeah,
I know you use the word leadership, and I give you a hard time about the word leadership, but
yeah,
maybe that's what you're referring to, right? This is good leadership. Good leadership is when you're around people that are in control of themselves. They're self-aware, and they're not going to let these things play out in such a negative way that it undermines the good of everything. And I think
yeah,
it's we are at a weird place right now where if you speak out about anything that you feel strongly about, then you're criticized. And that this is, he just gets into the whole um free speech, but never not as long as that speech disagrees with me, right? That's what
yeah,
this
yeah.
and I feel that we're coming out of that. That's the whole
I think we
how he's
are,
right.
and I think that we were talking about various kind of celebrity like people that get microphones and cameras in their face all the time, like Bill
Yeah.
Maher and Joe Rogan and this guy Scott Galloway we've been talking about. There's a litany of conservative talk show hosts that I like. A couple of them I don't. Most of
But
the
not
liberal,
just conservatives anymore. I mean, even the
yeah,
independents,
that was
uh,
my point. That was my
as
point.
myself, are moving, more towards the right to balance this thing out a little bit.
Well, I was, you brought up Scott Galloway a couple times, and I just saw a little bit of his TED talk, one of his recent TED talks, and he was talking about all of this, and the premise was, the first slide was, do you love your children?
Hmm.
And then he goes into all to me, it's all the hypocrisy, right?
Yes,
Like
that's
just
exactly
as
what
a,
it is.
for instance, fat shaming is a thing, but being fat is not healthy. So what are
Mhm.
we encouraging?
Yep.
Why are we encouraging obese people that everything's okay? No,
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah.
And is that because of the pharmaceutical companies, streams of revenue? Or, I mean, you get all into all this conspiratorial shit. At the end of the day, I just seek sense. I just seek, does this make sense?
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
And then, the classic stuff when you're playing with self-awareness is like, okay, who benefits from this? Why would someone do or say such a thing? What's the goal? What's the source of the money? Who profits from this? All these questions. I think that's all, to me, that's all critical thinking. And we don't do nearly enough of that stuff. We just look at
Hmm.
something or hear something and say, that's what it is. Like,
Yeah.
without context. That's not self-aware.
Yeah. But I like to believe the same direction you're going, that maybe we as this our generation, right? That's I'm not a baby boomer, but very close to it. You're at the very tail end of the baby boomer, so you're not a full-fledged baby boomer, but this next wave of whether it's leadership or self-awareness or thought leaders, really need to change this narrative, because you can't blame the younger generation for not buying in to the bullshit that's been pumped out of these politicians and even our media the last you know the last 15, 20 years, but particularly the last few years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that starts at the very, very top with this. Oh geez, I gotta reserve my language. How would you describe Joe Biden? Right, you talk about one of the worst leaders ever, the most
Yeah. He
dividing
doesn't, he
president.
doesn't, he
Yeah.
doesn't deserve the word leader by any means.
Yeah.
He's compromised, and he's compromised financially, economically, militarily, and physically and mentally. He's just
He truly
compromised
is.
across the
And
board.
again, let's not to make this a Trump Biden debate, but people wonder why Trump is becoming more popular than ever. Because you got to give it to one thing about you can put the politics aside. The guy speaks from his heart,
Yeah,
and he's not
yeah,
scripted at all,
yeah.
for good or for bad. And again, whether you disagree with his politics, it's resonating with people and a younger generation of voters that may throw this election in a direction that we've never seen before. And
It's gonna be very interesting, and I don't pay much attention to the quote unquote pundits because I don't think anybody really knows until we know,
mhm,
until the votes have been counted, and that's a whole nother topic of how that works.
mhm,
But yeah, I think that we're pressing up against human nature. We're pressing up against common sense.
mhm,
We're spending far too much time dealing with symptoms instead of root causes. And people are getting away with distracting us from things. It's like, I want to talk about this. Well, what's going on right now in the Democratic Party is they're ratcheting up the abortion talk because it
yes,
works. It works.
right,
And but everyone needs to understand, I think, there's probably like 10 things that need to be considered. That's
mhm,
just one of them,
yeah,
right? And you got to collectively consider all of them because you're not going to get everything you want. I don't care what side you're on,
no,
right? You just got to figure out what's important. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but my important stuff is everyone's safety, right? Then everyone's freedom,
yeah,
then how much shit costs, right? And then if people are coming into the country, who are they? And
yeah,
why are they coming here? What are their plans? And shouldn't we keep track of that? You know?
yeah,
So everything else pales in comparison. If those don't work, nothing works. Abortion doesn't matter, you
yeah.
know? So I don't know. It's again, I think that's just more of a are you reflecting on that? Are you aware of that? Are you in agreement with the concept of all of these things being choices? I
Mhm.
mean, let's be, we always say let's not get political, and then we get political because it's hard not to. But I
Because
think that the
everything's
the the
political, right?
the simplest example for me of something that doesn't make sense is if you're in your 20s and you say, and you take the time out, you don't go to class, instead, you stand outside your school with a flag of some other country, and you use the phrase from the river to the sea. And then when I come up and I ask you, what's the name of the river and what's the name of the sea, and you can't tell me, shut the fuck up. You
Yeah.
know, you don't even know why you're here. You don't even know.
Yeah,
So,
I'll give you a perspective on this though, Mark. I felt the same. I still feel the same way you do. But when I ran this by somebody, let's just say in their 30s, uh, I was impressed with their response and how it affected it changed my perspective.
mhm,
And the way that they said this was, hey, no different than because we were talking about the comparison. There was a really good piece that was put out about comparing the 1960s and 70s, Vietnam and apartheid and all of that compared to what's going on today. And what's the difference, right? And sure you can extrapolate in some ways, but other ways, this particular piece was saying it is different. These people really don't even know what they're protesting about. At least back
mhm,
then, it was more specific in terms of Vietnam, and it truly was students. Most of these protesters are not. They know, at least in some cases, 80% of the protesters are not even from the college, right?
mhm,
These are agitators, professional agitators. So that's number one. But what he was saying was, yeah, you can discount, you can laugh at these college kids, but really, like a lot of things, it's a symptom of a lot of other things. Mistrust of what our government did during COVID. And hey, in fairness to that senior group of uh, kids that are about to ready to graduate, you talk about a COVID shit sandwich that they got, right? They didn't even get a high school experience because of COVID. They
mhm,
didn't get a prom. They didn't get a graduation. And then you fast forward 4 or 5 years, and what do they get? They get this again. So
mhm.
it is really a group of people that is justified in being angry and frustrated about a lot of things
Hmm.
that our government is doing. And this is the one thing maybe that they can act out on. I don't know. I'm not saying this is right, but it did change my perspective. Young people do have they don't know shit. They haven't done anything yet. They haven't paid any taxes. Most of them are on their parents' uh, credit card still. So, but you could hope that something good comes from it, where they're acting out about something's not right, because something is not right to this generation. They really did get a shit sandwich, and of course I can blame everything on the on the Biden administration, and
Yeah, I think it's still, and I agree with 100%. I agree with that. I still think, though, at the end of the day, you're faced with the reality that it is how you respond to things. It's not what happens to you. These are just other things, and so not to diminish them, not to dismiss them, but they are in fact just other things.
yeah.
And
Yeah. Hey,
and one of
Mark,
the
how about
things,
that? How about that group that responded by singing the American Pledge of Allegiance or something?
yeah,
The
keeping the
fraternity.
flag, keeping the American flag
But isn't
off the
that a
ground.
great response? How you respond to something? So
It
instead of
totally is. It
yeah,
totally is. I mean, it's like me saying Merry Christmas to the woman screaming at me. It's disarming. One
yeah,
of the things
tell
that
that
I,
story just so I understand the context of how this young group of I think it was a fraternity said, you know what, we don't want to, we're not going to just roll over, but they had the courage to take these protesters on,
yep.
and they changed the narrative, and then they raised like a $500,000, right, for a frat
Yeah,
party
I
or
heard
something.
about the GoFundMe. It was like a $500,000 in a couple of days. I mean, if
Yeah,
that doesn't tell you where the sentiment is out there,
yeah,
then I don't know what does. But
yeah.
I still think that you can't get away from the idea that it is your response to things. It's not what happens to you. And one of the things that I have recently brought into my teaching, my coaching in the your favorite leadership space is this idea of what do you do when you're faced with some sort of negative emotion in response to a circumstance or a person or a thing. And back to my dad's fighter pilot days when he said, "What do you do when an engine catches on fire?" And the answer is nothing.
Mhm,
It's this pause that we really, I think, need to figure out how to get into our lives to say, if it's something that's causing a negative emotion, it's making me angry, it's making me sad, it's making me anxious, it's making me fearful, and there's a list of other negative emotions, can we get the brain to just go, okay, that means I don't respond yet. That means I need to take responsibility for how I respond by first pausing and trying to regain some level of objectivity
mhm,
instead of just screaming in response or lashing out in response.
mhm.
It's that fundamental in my humble opinion.
Yeah, you'll be interested in this. Last night I had dinner with a couple, but the guy is really impressive guy, but he's I don't know if he's a VP or general manager or something like that for a movie theater chain. So they own uh I think a half a dozen movie theaters in northern and southern California. And these are I don't know if they have them in Florida, but those are the movie theater concepts where it's like they serve food and the recliners. It's a really nice experience, right? They're like
Yeah, they
high
do.
end movie. Have you been to one of those?
Yes, we have a couple here. They're fun.
Yeah, they are fun. So he manages that, or he's on the management team, and he was sharing with me that he had just come off a conference down. It was in Las Vegas, and apparently they're like like any other industry, they all meet once a year, or they have this industry conference, and it's the movie theaters they're selling their movies because they have to buy them in order to show them. Right, this is the big screen,
Mhm.
and so they're all there, right? Paramount, Disney. Uh, all the big movie producers are there selling their goods so that and I was encouraged by this. He said that the Disney guys were really going out of their way um, to convince the movie theater owners that they were no longer doing the woke thing, that those days they made some mistakes, that those days are over, um, and that Disney's going back to the basics. Disney's going, but this is kind of cool. He said that because think about this, if these movie theater owners, if they don't have a good product and people come to the movies, they don't make any money. So
Right.
their revenue is directly related to the quality of the movies that are made on the big screen.
Hmm.
And the ones that made all the money are, Tom Cruise. He said anything that's related to America good does very, very well. It pays
Hmm.
all the bills. It's like everything
Hmm.
else in life, right? It's the 10% that pays 90% of the bills.
Hmm.
And that right now that Hollywood and even all of those movie producers realize, man, the last couple of years have been a disaster as
Hmm.
far as what's going on. And that the movies that sell the best are patriot American movies. Like, even say what you want about Tom Cruise, but that guy can bring in the money, right?
Yep.
You
Yep.
know why? Because his movies are pro America.
Hmm.
I just thought it was an interesting perspective that it is changing. And now the movies that are going to start to be made are going to be more pro America than what has been going on is this bash America. Everything's bad about America, right? Uh,
Yeah. Well, the other, no, that's very heartening to hear.
yeah, I thought so. Yeah, it's
I love
positive.
hearing stuff like that. But I think, back to the notion of it's how you respond to things, not what happens to you. I think that we're going to continually be faced with things that don't make sense to us, particularly as long as the current administration is in place.
Yep.
You got challenges with our justice system. You've got challenges with our education system, with our entertainment
Hmm.
business, corporate America. But all these things, if you meet them without emotion initially, if you meet them with a pause, and if you lead into those conversations with questions, I think that's a real good way to begin the process of saying, okay, I'm not going to let you get away with what you just said, but I'm not going to beat you over the head with it either. I'm going to find a way to get us both to stay on topic, remain objective.
Hmm.
We can still end up disagreeing at the end, but we're not going to lose our temper. We're not going to be disrespectful. We're not going to get mad. And even though you don't have control over the other side of the conversation, you kind of do if you try and get better at all of that stuff. And I've been working with that stuff for a while now, and it works. It doesn't work every time, but it works. If you want to, you used the phrase earlier, it changed my perspective.
Hmm.
A lot of people out there don't allow themselves to change their perspective. They're so stuck in their own perspective.
Yeah.
And so I think both of those things are ongoing. You need to keep an open mind to things, but you have to hold people accountable to the things they say and the things they do. That's a choice as well,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. There's something else I don't know, becoming more self-aware of the importance of capitalism. And sure, it has its flaws, but why capitalism still is the best system, because the market speaks for how we respond. And I wrote a couple examples on what your response to this. But if we truly stay in capitalism, right, where the market determines who's right or wrong, not any one person, it's way better than politicians. It's way better than, let's say, A-listed celebrities that have a really bizarre ideology. But here's an example of some companies that maybe not officially, but we know have responded differently. And this is just in this last year, right? I mentioned Disney, Bud Light, Planet Fitness, and Target. Look at the stock of those companies. Look at
Mhm.
the leadership of those companies, and look how poorly they've done because they went down this. Uh, I got to find a better term for it. What do you call? Let's just say they got the wrong messaging. Their messaging was off, and Bud Light is still down 40 something percent.
Wow.
It's the largest disaster of a stock, because of that leadership. This started, and Disney, same thing, right? Way down. Planet Fitness, they had a huge amount of people cancel the membership because of the trans guy
Hmm.
that was in the locker room with somebody. And then how about
Hmm.
Target with their trans apparel line, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, I agree with you about capitalism. I think people try to deny it all the time.
Yeah.
They try and make excuses about it all the time. Life is a meritocracy. It
Yeah.
really is a meritocracy. You
Yep.
don't you don't have to believe that if you don't want, but then you're not looking at reality because and you and I talk about it all the time. Sports is the perfect example. I mean, sports is life. It's why
Mhm.
sports are so good for kids team
Mhm,
sports, individual sports, they teach you so much.
mhm.
But one of the things they teach you is this isn't about fairness. This is about work ethic, consistency, showing up every day, respecting your coaches, respecting your teammates. There's so much that life mirrors sports, but take that into the corporate arena, take it into any industry, and you can fight that all day long. But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's a meritocracy.
Yeah, here, another one again about the market speaking. So here, let's just pick on San Francisco. It's so easy to do, right? But the this the San Francisco superintendent, which actually is I consider a friend, not a great friend, but I knew him because he used to be the superintendent of here Unified School District. Really good guy, and he just took the job a couple years ago. But they're about ready to file for bankruptcy, and they brought him in to try to fix this disaster. He didn't create it. He's trying to fix it. But the fact of the matter is their enrollment drop is like 30 something percent in the last few years.
Mm,
Why do you think their enrollment has dropped 30 something? Because it's a shitty product.
yep.
That's why.
Yep.
Because anybody in San Francisco that has kids either going to send their kid to a private school, or they're going to get the fuck out of there. So even that, and yet you still have these I don't know, what do you call them, Mark? Ideologues about
Yep.
how they think the world should be. They
Hmm.
keep producing, uh, they don't improve the product, and then they wonder why they don't have any money.
Yeah. Well, it's because of racism or prejudice is why, right?
It's 100%
It,
related to that.
yeah.
They made a decision that you could not test brown and black kids the same as you can test. Well, there is no white kids left in San Francisco, so it was basically the Chinese, right? That's what's so fucked up. It's a comedy show. So all the Asian that were really good at math and others, they just left.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what
And now they don't
happens. I
have the
mean,
tax revenue from the federal government to run the district. It's so simple. But
yeah, well, it's conceptually simple, but I mean that one of the coolest things about us getting together and doing this podcast, and there are many of them that I appreciate, is that you live in California and I live in Florida. You're in a different country than I am. You're in a
on a
completely
different
different,
planet.
yeah, you're in a different planet than I am, and we both acknowledge that. And so, but I'm not, you're not hearing it from a guy who thinks he knows what's going on in Florida. You're hearing it from a guy who knows what's going on
Yeah,
in
but
Florida.
keep in mind, Mark, just for clarity on this.
Yeah,
I don't live in San Francisco. I live
understood.
in the East Bay, and it is completely different where I live. Like it
Hmm.
could be a piece of Texas or Florida.
Hmm.
That's how different my town and where I live is. And I don't think
Yep.
most people realize that it can be dramatically different just by what county and what city you're in. And
Yep.
that's the beauty of the American system, right?
Yep. Yep.
It does
Well,
work.
well, it's all that. It's also what supports the notion that the closer to the people that you can get the law, like county law, state law, not federal law. Federal law is an all-encompassing thing that we
Yeah.
drop on different cultures in different
Mhm.
places in the country.
Yeah.
That's why people push that. No, that should be a state law. Give that back to the states. Give
Yeah.
that back to the counties and the cities and the municipalities. That's the
Absolutely.
purpose of that because they're so different more often than not,
And
you
it
know?
truly reflects the people that are in those communities. The system
Yep.
is designed beautifully when people use it.
Yeah.
And walk into drop a vote for a Republican or Democrat every 4 years is not using the system.
No. No. And I guess we're bumping up on time. So what I wanted to do is just kind of not recap, but just I think we've developed a habit of liking to leave people with some action to take or some suggested piece of advice without being presumptuous.
Mhm.
And I just to reiterate, I think that if you recognize, and this is a journey for me and I'm still on the journey, but it was a couple years back when I started coming out of some of the damage I got into with my divorce. And I started back into the self-awareness stuff. And the whole thing is everything's a choice. It's not what happens to you, it's how you respond. And once you get control over how you respond through things like exercise, meditation, good conversation, open mindedness, et cetera, all of a sudden you start to regain some semblance of control over your own happiness and your future. You're never going to have total control because most of the stuff in our lives is beyond our control. But man, the power of recognizing that level of self-awareness and responding to bad things with a level of objectivity instead of just emotional reaction, I think it can change your life. I really
Oh, there's
do.
no question. It's the highest form of living, right? It's living a quality life, and it does require a lot of work and balance of these 5
Mhm.
areas of your life. But there is one thing I'd like people to end. You said, what's the takeaway from the show? Is that if you ever go to San Francisco, make sure you turn your wheels 9 degrees inward.
You save a few people $63. God bless you, Jim. All
So
right, dude.
that
That was fun.
yeah. All right.
All right. Thanks, dude. We'll see you next
Okay.
week.
Thanks.
Peace.